Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Holly Gibson, Senior Product Specialist here at UDA Technologies, and I'm excited to welcome you to today's webinar on 5 tips to save 5 hours a week with QuickBooks Online integration. Now, I'm joined today by my colleague, Jordan Davis.
Hello, everyone.
And we are can't wait to show you how this integration with QuickBooks Online can impact your business, can really save you time and money, avoid rework related headaches, double entry. So there's so many benefits that you'll see from the integration. We can't wait to get started. Now, if you're new to UDA Technologies or ConstructionOnline, ConstructionOnline is our award-winning project management platform used currently by over 750,000 users in more than 75 countries all over the world. ConstructionOnline actually manages over $80 billion in projects every day. And one of our goals as a company is to help you become more profitable on those projects. And we know that one of the ways that you can do that is through quick, accurate job costing. And so we really can't wait to share with you how that will work for you with the QuickBooks Online integration. Now, as we look at these 5 tips to save 5 hours a week with QuickBooks Online integration, one of the first things that we'll dive into is a little bit of a discussion on why accurate accounting integration is important to your bottom line. What benefits will you see? Why is this going to be important, not only from a time savings perspective, but from a profitability perspective? We'll also show you how setting up the integration can be done in 3 easy steps. We'll take a look at how to send estimates, change orders, invoices, purchase orders from ConstructionOnline right over to QuickBooks, again with no double entry. We'll show you how to bring actuals, invoiced amounts, and committed costs from QuickBooks back into your ConstructionOnline account so you can see that job costing in real time. And we'll also show you a dashboard where you can see exactly what you owe to each of your vendors, either on a per project basis or overall as a company.
Now you can see we've got quite a lot of topics to cover today, one of which is the big why question, right? Like, why is this important? Why should we pay attention to this? I'm really excited to jump into that. But speaking of questions, if you have questions as we're working through our topics today, this is a tips and tricks webinar, so we're going to be showing off some specific use cases, things for you to consider, as well as some of the basics for setup as we move through today. But if any questions come to you as we're working through our presentation today, please feel free to send them to us. You can do that through the GoToWebinar panel, where you'll see a section titled Questions. If you expand that section, you'll see that there is a message box where you can actually send us questions. It looks like someone actually has already sent us a message preemptively before we got started. Hello, it's good to say hi to you today. But as we move forward, do send us your questions. We'd love to spend some time at the end of our presentation today to answer those questions with you. Without further ado, let's get started.
Let's jump in. So when we're looking at QuickBooks integration with ConstructionOnline, I think a good place to start, Jordan, is just a quick discussion on why accounting integration is important to a company's bottom line. Now, the integration with QuickBooks is something that we've done here at UDA Technologies for about the last 15 years or so. We've been a QuickBooks certified Gold developer. We've really invested some time here because we know how important it is. When you think about the benefits that a client sees, really what will you tell them? What challenges are they facing that we're going to help them solve with this?
Yeah, Holly, I almost feel like this topic is somewhat my bread and butter. A lot of the work that I do when I'm helping companies get started using ConstructionOnline is helping them align their budgets and their estimates with their accounting and their bookkeeping practices. What I found in a lot of construction companies is that each team can be doing a relatively great job at producing estimates, winning jobs, making sure that they're tracking their budgets properly, but there seems to be some type of disconnect or friction in between the 2 different houses of the company. You have one side that's trying to keep the project under budget, and the other side that is keeping up with all the pieces that really represent the real dollars of the project, keeping up with the bottom line of the project, and making sure that a company's cash flow is positive and moving in a good direction. But there's this friction that I mentioned, or a gap between the two, where there's not an alignment. So that bookkeeping has questions to ask about, well, how do we code this? What information, like where does this land in terms of the budget? And over back on the project management and estimation and budget management side, there are questions of where we stand. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to a company that just says, well, I can't tell you how much money we spent on our last job. And that's one, that's ridiculous. And two, that's really unnecessary. I've seen so many companies transform their business practices and processes just by implementing the QuickBooks integration, pulling the teams together and really starting to see exactly where they stand, not just on a per project basis, but really starting to dial back and saying, where are we this week? Mm-hmm. How do our finances look? What decisions do we need to make? What adjustments do we need to make? And really, what pivots do we need to implement so we can stay under budget and finish our job with excellent performance?
Yeah, it's such a powerful thing and a big shift from what I see companies maybe who want to make some improvements on the job costing side, but have run into some challenges, some things that I hear. And so if this sounds like you, definitely pay attention here. But, some things that I run into with clients is a couple of things. Could be that a company is doing, like you said, Jordan, maybe a really pretty good job of, accurate estimating. Their project managers are doing a good job of documenting expenditures. They're paying out vendors. But that there's still a delay because there's a disconnect. What happens, or what I hear often, is an owner will tell me, or a project manager will tell me, we do eventually get that job costing information, but it's usually after the completion of the job and often delayed by several months. So it makes it hard because at that point you're already often bidding and looking at the next projects your company is going to do. So if there are lessons to be learned, you miss them already. And so that transfer of information that can happen much more quickly and the visibility is huge. Now, on the challenge side of things, what I sometimes hear is people who say, Holly, that sounds really good, but to get there would just take us so much manual work. It's going to be a lot of work. We're going to have to commit to doing certain things as a company. And while you will have to commit to doing certain things, what I'm really excited to show you most today is how all of this can be accomplished without an additional burden of work. And in fact, many teams will see that burden relieved a bit. We'll take away the need to do manual coding, trying to get it right. You're going to relieve some inaccuracies that are really inevitable when, each piece of that is really just dependent on, a human's manual data entry. We're going to give you a chance to do it once and do it right, and then use that data moving forward for the rest of the project. Now, of course, the first place where we really want to start is setup. So what we've done is created a brand new project for you today, Summit Office Plaza. And for this project, we have put together an estimate, and we are now ready to send this estimate to QuickBooks. Now, at this stage, our first step is going to be to go ahead and step through that really simple 3-step process for getting our account connected. You can see as we're looking at our estimate here that on the accounting integration section, ConstructionOnline is already helping me learn what I need to do next. So it's letting me know my company is not yet connected, but we can go ahead and get started. Now, once you select this option, you are going to have a choice to tell ConstructionOnline, are we going to use QuickBooks Online or are we going to connect with QuickBooks Desktop? Today's session, we're going to focus on QuickBooks Online, so that's where we'll be getting connected, but do know that integration is available with QuickBooks Desktop as well.
Yeah, and that's right. If you are a company that's considering either integrating with QuickBooks Desktop or Online, or in some cases I've worked with companies recently who are making the move to QuickBooks Online from QuickBooks Desktop, some of the concepts we're covering today, if you're already using QuickBooks Desktop, will transfer really easily across as well. So if you are considering that, watch these next couple of steps because you'll see some pretty similar functions as well.
Now notice the first step is to make some choices about our integration. So we'll be making some choices here about how information is transferred, what types of accounts or items are going to be used in QuickBooks. So we'll look at things like outgoing accounts, our QuickBooks items, and then incoming revenue accounts as well.
That's right. So for the first page here, we're looking at setting up our outgoing accounts. Now, to keep it very simple, ConstructionOnline's integration with QuickBooks really doesn't interact that much with the chart of accounts at all. We don't depend on it for importing transactions. The only time it comes into play is if you are just now defining or setting up new products, services, items inside of QuickBooks Online, or in the event that you need to add a new item to QuickBooks Online's products and services list. That's really the only time the setting will come into play. I'm not going to dive too deeply because we're really just looking through setup. In almost every case with companies I've worked with, all they have to do is change this account name to their outgoing account of choice, and then make sure that the account type lines up with their primary account, whether they're working with a cost of goods sold approach or a construction work in progress type approach. Really, the system is flexible enough to handle both accounting approaches. On the next page, we're looking at setting a few basic settings for the QuickBooks items. The first is to decide whether or not we want to use a parent item. Now, in this case, this is really asking us, do we want to segment or cordon off the items we're using for our construction costs and our construction income away from maybe other items if we have a business that has multiple divisions and maybe has some type of other service or warranty that doesn't apply to the construction division, but we want to keep our books in-house. We can choose to separate the items. Now, from what I understand, Holly, your QuickBooks account, is it using parent items?
It is, yes.
Okay, great. So we'll just keep everything set the way it is for now. The more common approach I've seen is to leave this set, but to actually designate this with, construction or something like that, just to keep your divisions separate if you're taking this approach. If not, you can uncheck the box. This is really helpful for aligning with an existing set of items as well. You can just match your estimate to your items inside of QuickBooks and move right ahead. But since Holly already has these items configured, we're going to make sure to use parent items today. And of course the last, it's funny because it's almost a mirror of the outgoing accounts. We're setting our revenue account, which is really, how are we going to track income for the items as well. Some companies that I've worked with only want to track job costing. They're not really concerned about the revenue side of the house. That's something you can turn off here. If you're only worried about costs and you don't want to maybe slip an invoice in somehow, maybe that's handled in a different stage of the project, you can uncheck this box, no problem. But in our case, we really want to see both sides today. We want to make sure that both our expenses and our income are flowing nicely across to QuickBooks and are easily tracked back inside of ConstructionOnline for our extended project management team.
Now, as we finish that up, what the system will ask us to do next is to go ahead and connect to our QuickBooks account. Now, because I've already logged into QuickBooks on this computer before, it's picking that up for me. I can see that I'm already signed into QuickBooks, and all I have to do is hit that connect. If you're doing this for the first time, you'll be presented with a place to go ahead and enter your QuickBooks Online credentials to get those accounts connected. Now I can confirm here that I have successfully connected to QuickBooks Online, and we're now ready to integrate.
Yeah, that's really all there is to making the connection work from the front. Oftentimes, Holly, people will think about integrations, and especially accounting integrations. Maybe they're scarred from other platforms about this big, hairy process they have to chunk through, but that's it.
Now, of course, there's a couple of other tabs here that are worth just taking a quick peek at while we're looking at our setup. The first one is calculation methods. This really affects what you see on your estimates and reports. So you can choose for remaining values. Are we going to look at what we would recommend here, our adjusted costs less our QuickBooks actuals to give us remaining balance? Also, down here, when it comes to invoicing, are we going to look at the client's the total price less our QuickBooks invoiced amounts to give us a client balance? You can choose to still use some manual entry in combination with QuickBooks if you want. That's really more of a one-off setting, though. The recommended settings are going to be automatically selected for you. Same thing with change orders. So one thing that's really cool about the integration with QuickBooks Online is that we can go ahead and set it up so that when a change order is approved, it is automatically sent to QuickBooks, and then we automatically create an invoice for that. So we know nothing is going to get missed. Those invoices are going to just flow right into QuickBooks as soon as that approval is completed. That's how I like to keep mine set up, so we're going to leave these boxes checked.
Yeah, it can be a pretty great time saver and reduce the questions of, well, did we set up an invoice for this change order just yet? Which, when you're dealing with high volume, or if you're working through multiple change orders for a project, that's a real consideration. But it's a great safety net to make sure at least the transactions are generated. They won't automatically send out of QuickBooks Online if you don't want them to. I know that's a control step that some companies want in place. So don't worry about that information flowing out or before you have a chance to review. This is just setting you up for success and saving you a lot of time.
Exactly. Now, our next step in the setup, now that we have linked our account, is going to be to go ahead and link up our project and our client. Now, remember that ConstructionOnline does always keep you on track. So as I'm looking at my estimate, I can see in my accounting integration section that my company is now connected, but my project is not. So that's really going to be the next thing we want to do here is go ahead and link my project. Now, when I choose this option, it's going to bring me to an area where I can see a little bit more detail about what I need to do. And I can see that my next step in linking the project is actually that I need to assign a customer. I haven't done that yet for this job, and we do need a customer in order to be able to send this project to QuickBooks. So it'll ask me to go ahead and assign a primary customer. We'll go ahead and choose Polly. And then what the integration here has found is that there's already a customer with this name in my QuickBooks account. So really we're going to decide here, are we going to link this to an existing customer, or are we going to choose an existing different customer? If this client wasn't already in my QuickBooks account, what happens at this step is that it just creates the client for you in QuickBooks. It'll create that customer in your QuickBooks account. So again, no manual entry. You're not needing to go to QuickBooks and set anything up ahead of time here.
And that's it.
And that's it. So we've linked up our client, and now we're going to go ahead and finish linking the project. And
Also,
you'll notice
that's it.
that our project is now connected. And so as we're doing those steps, I can see my checklist being completed, that I have in fact linked my primary customer, I have linked my project, and now when I'm ready, I'll be able to send the estimate. Now, one common question that I will get from time to time is, when should we send the estimate to QuickBooks? And so what my answer normally is when it's ready, when it's complete. When you have the contract signed, that's usually when you want to go ahead and send the estimate to QuickBooks. If you're using any of the estimate lock functionality, that's usually a good time to put some of that in place if you would like. But when the estimate is completed, that's when you want to send. So there's really no need to worry about integration while your estimate is still in progress. And while the integration is a huge time saver and offers a lot of automation, we're not automatically creating anything in QuickBooks until you're ready to get that estimate sent over. Now in this case we are, so we want to go ahead and send our estimate. Now I can do that here, or I could do that from the estimating page. We'll go ahead and do it here. And I will have some choices for each estimate about which pieces are going to be sent over and how I want that to be handled. So in this case, if you have things like taxes, line item markups, or selections included in your estimate, you'll be able to decide whether to include those. In most cases, you will, but in some cases, you might not want to include those things. And then, of course, if we want to include our company overhead and margin, which in this case I do. Now, you have the choice here with the overhead and margin to include that as prorated or as separate line items. It's really just a preference. You can do this either way. We'll use the separate approach here so you can see how that might show up. We'll go ahead and select Create.
Speaking of time savings, trying to do the math yourself to prorate the company margin across every single item proportionately would take probably an incalculable, well, okay, to be fair, it's probably calculable, but nobody wants to spend the time to try and figure out how long that would take, because you would have to actually take the steps to do it. There's a lot of heavy lifting that just happened that I think that we sometimes at UDA Technologies are accustomed to, but I've spoken with so many companies who will build their estimates in something, let's say, some type of spreadsheet program like Excel, or they're working with an older estimating system because their estimators are familiar with it, that doesn't play nice with their accounting system, that actually forces someone on the bookkeeping or accounting side to go through and then manually rebuild the estimates. I mean, that's one, you're exposing your company to risk because they could misenter the amounts, and two, you're really paying somebody for something that you could reallocate that labor cost to. If you really think about it, someone's getting paid to do something that can now be handled in, was that 2 clicks?
It was 2 clicks in only a couple of seconds. And just for perspective, this is a pretty hefty estimate. So we have 16 divisions here. You can see each of my sheets has a good bit of information on it. So when I think about trying to create this manually, this is really where that first step of the job costing process often begins to break down, because the idea is well, maybe we don't need all of this information. Maybe we'll break this lump sum up into, a material versus labor or something like that and just get it entered in. Or if we are trying to do some breakdowns, we're often spending way too much time trying to now manually re-enter that in QuickBooks. Now, to give you an idea of what that looks like, I'll also show you one really nice touch with the integration is that anything you do, there's always a link to it. So I can see in my activity log here that I sent the estimate to QuickBooks, and if I just click on that, it'll go ahead and take me right into my QuickBooks account to that estimate, so we can see exactly what that looks like when it shows up.
Now, again, if you're using QuickBooks Online, you're probably familiar with being able to track down an estimate for a customer or a job or other transactions. In some cases, I'm actually really excited to talk about tracking down vendor transactions, which I found to be a pain point inside of QuickBooks Online, but something that we can really improve. But just jumping directly from the project to the estimate without needing to go hunt through QuickBooks Online's navigation soup really could be a tiny additional time saver.
I think so. Now you'll notice as we look at the estimate here that it's a little bit, it's not overwhelming. So we've got all of our subcategories represented, and we've set ourselves up for some really nice job costing. What we haven't done is send over every single line item. So sometimes people are a little bit fearful about maybe cluttering up the QuickBooks with too much, but really it's sending over just the right amount of detail to give you the job costing that you need. Now, as we start to step into what other information we might create or send to QuickBooks, I want to talk a little bit about what I recommend that process to be. So when we're looking at information that we can send to QuickBooks, it's estimates. We can also create purchase orders for QuickBooks right from ConstructionOnline. We can do the same thing with invoicing, and then we've already taken a quick look at change orders. We'll take a deeper look at that in just a moment as how those change orders are going to go over. Now, I've already sent my estimate and I have my change orders set up to go over automatically. So when we look at starting that job costing process, I really recommend that people do take advantage of using a PO process, and I'll show you how easy it is to do. You have the option here and in a couple of other places. This is my go-to because I'm always looking at my estimate. So I just want to choose this action menu, come down to my QuickBooks integration, and then go ahead and choose Create PO for QuickBooks. Now, when I think about eliminating manual data entry, this is a great way to start to set that up, because as you start to receive invoices or bills from your vendors that need to be paid, you have to record those in QuickBooks, and we can pull those actuals back over. Now the question becomes, when you receive that piece of paper from your subcontractor, how is that getting into QuickBooks and how is it coded the right way? A purchase order is really going to make sure that that happens, again, without any extra work. So what we're going to do here is go ahead and create a purchase order for Danny, and then we'll create one for our Ponder vendor here. I'm going to go ahead and hide my rows that don't have any value associated with them so that I can choose. And let's just say that we want to go ahead and create a purchase order for our concrete. So I'm going to go ahead and select these two items. We'll choose the percentage we want to do here. So to keep it simple, I'm going to do 100%, but you could actually create this at, 2 POs for 50% each, or, however you expect that to go. And then we're just going to create. Just like with the estimate, this is going to happen really quickly. It's almost too fast to see, but if you're paying attention to the bottom right of my screen, you'll see a quick message pop up that says creating purchase order, and then almost instantaneously it's done. And just like with the estimate, I now have the purchase order created in QuickBooks for that vendor. Again, no extra work. We're going to see that this is coded exactly how I need it to be, matches all of my items within the estimate, which means when we mark this as paid, when we convert this over to a bill, my actuals are going to come over accurately attributed to the right place on the estimate. No extra work. I think I've said that like 10 times, but it is so amazing how much work can be cut out, and how how much better job costing you can get.
Well, and what's really interesting to me when I'm working with companies and we get to the point where we're discussing purchase orders, how many companies have the dream or the goal of, well, we want to start using purchase orders, or, well, we've talked about it before, which is such a wild conversation for me to have because, in a well-controlled company, I think, purchase orders really act as a great tracking mechanism so that you can make sure that the payments that you're making were established beforehand to make sure you're not overpaying people. That if you are starting to trend towards going over budget, you start to ask the right questions internally to find out why. Why are we paying Danny, 2 times the bill amount? Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's a mistake and you've been double invoiced. It happens. It's not intentional. Sometimes, in worst case scenarios, it might be intentional. But what we've found is that a lot of companies don't implement a purchase order tracking system because it takes too much time to do manually. Because, well, the purchase orders are probably going to be inaccurate, or, well, we don't have a great process for entering the purchase orders, and our bookkeeping department really isn't sure what they should be putting in. Well, you can really help teams succeed across the board and increase your efficiency and accuracy in terms of tracking just by using the purchase order system as is. Because the second thing that can really speed up the process here is that when you do receive that bill from Danny for his project, for the work that he's done for concrete, right? What you can do is, instead of going in and entering the bill manually line by line and making sure that the customer and job is correct and making sure that all of these things are lined up, you can just click the copy to bill button from the purchase order you've made for Danny, and you'll see, oh, look, here's our bill. Here we go. It's copied over the amounts. Let's say that he's doing progress invoicing for us, and he's going to maybe bill us for 50% of the work. Well, that's really straightforward. We can go through now and adjust some of the information on our bill and track that against our purchase order. Mm-hmm. It's such an efficient process, and it's a real shame that some companies feel like this is too much extra work when it really isn't.
Yeah, it really cuts out the work. One thing I'll hear sometimes surrounding the purchase order question is, well, we're maybe a little too small. We're not a huge company. We don't really need to use a purchase order system. But actually, I found that it can help those smaller teams just as much as the larger teams in terms of being able to do more and get better information. Now, at this point, I've created my purchase order. We've copied that over to a bill. And to keep things simple, I'm just going to mark this as paid, and I'll go ahead and record a payment for the entire amount. So we'll just apply the entire amount. We're going to pay this out and go ahead and save it. Now, when it comes to getting this information back, again, super easy. What we want to do at this point is run an import. So we'll be able to import both our actuals, which would be bills or expenses that are entered into QuickBooks, and these will import over. You do need to make sure if you decide to enter a bill or expense manually, you do need to make sure that you're using the item level, not the account level. So we want to make sure that that's coded correctly and that you're choosing those items. If you go through that purchase order process that we just looked at, most of that work is going to be done for you. Purchase orders will import in as committed cost, and in both of these cases, we can choose to bring over paid and unpaid, or paid only, maybe only unpaid. So you can choose how much of this data you want to pull over and maybe what you want that to represent or what that normally would represent on your estimate sheet. So we'll go ahead and do a quick import and let those items come right back into our ConstructionOnline estimate. And again, you can see how quick that is. It's really fast and easy for that import to happen. But now what you'll notice is as we look in our job costing view here, these screens that we have for QuickBooks committed and QuickBooks actual cost are now going to start showing some additional information. So we created a PO for concrete. The items that I'm using here are the sections that I'm using in the estimate. You can see that there is not only their initial base and adjusted cost, but I can see that my QuickBooks committed amount is now populated automatically within this table, along with my QuickBooks actuals.
Now, this alone can be a massive amount of time saved. Holly, I was speaking with somebody, I think it was last week, who manually compiles this information here because either they're not a fan of the reports inside of QuickBooks Online at this point in time, which is a common criticism and a fair assessment, and also because, well, there was a bit of a misalignment between the information that the project management team had put together in the estimate, and the way that the items were structured, or the way that costs were recorded and accounted for inside of QuickBooks Online at that point in time. So they were actually building a sheet that looked exactly like this manually for every single job, and entering in the amounts manually over and over again. And this is a common story. I haven't heard this just once. I've heard of plenty of people who are having to take to manual approaches to deliver the information that the project management team needs just to stay on budget. That really is a shame. When they really could be leveraging a tool like this to not only save time, but also to increase accuracy and see the information really quickly without needing someone to act as a report generator.
Yeah, that's right. Now, this information is going to, as you guys can see, populate not only into the estimate itself, but start to populate some of those really helpful dashboards that are in Construction Online. Your remaining balance dashboard here is intended to help you see that remaining budget, so we can see what our adjusted costs were projected to be, what our actual costs to date are so far, and what is our remaining budget for this project. I can also see really quickly that I've paid out 100% for concrete here. So I'm at budget. We're good. Don't want to incur any additional expenses here, so it's nice to be able to see that. One thing that this chart does really nicely is it does turn colors. So as you start to inch closer to 100%, it's going to go from green to yellow to red, so you know exactly, kind of a quick glance of where you are. This information will also populate into the financial reports as well. So if we want to do some really great reporting, which, Jordan, like you mentioned, QuickBooks Online sometimes is lacking there. It's not really intended to be a construction management platform. So, it does a great job at what it does, but it's not necessarily going to give you the same type of reporting that you would get in Construction Online. So here we can do things like an estimate versus actual report, maybe a committed versus actual, which is again another great way to use those purchase orders. We could do a quick over budget report to see which sections maybe have gone over budget so far. So a lot of great reporting that you can do here.
Yeah, I was going to say the over budget report isn't really something that you could run or compile inside of QuickBooks Online, at least not out of the box. So you'd have to do probably a number of merges to try and get something close to that function. When really you could just run the report and see, well, where do we stand? It's actually really interesting to me because typically when people are running these types of reports, it's to print out for some type of meeting. Because the day-to-day operations don't really need the reports. You can just look at your budget.
Yeah, they just need the information.
Virtual real time at this point.
Now, a couple of additional things that we can create for or send to QuickBooks. The next section we want to take a quick look at is really getting paid. So creating invoices for receivables and then being able to record payments on those. Same process as creating a purchase order, really easy. We're going to go down to our QuickBooks integration option in this action menu. We're going to choose to create an invoice for QuickBooks. And then here we've got some choices about, how do we want to bill? Do we want to just create a single invoice for the remaining balance or total of all of our lines? Do we want to maybe do some progress invoicing and just, invoice for 20% of this job or 10% of the job? Or do we want to enter a custom amount for each line, which is really nice if you're going to create invoices for specific sections on this estimate. You might want to go in and do, a custom amount or percentage for only your first two divisions or, only certain sections of the estimate.
And if this menu looks familiar to you, it's because it is very, very similar to the progress invoicing menus that you would see if you were building these invoices inside of QuickBooks Online. Another side note, our best practice recommendation is actually to use our system to really speed up the process here, but you're not locked into just using the invoice or the purchase order creation system inside of Construction Online. We've just found that it can save you so much time that in probably 90+% of use cases, this is the better method.
It really is. That's exactly what we see. You can still create these in QuickBooks, by hand, but what we love here is that we're using the data that you've already put in for your estimate to be able to create these wonderful detailed invoices and purchase orders and records of expenses that are going to just help us be able to get so much better information. Now, just like with the purchase order that we created, or the estimate, we can click right here on the invoice. It will take us directly into our QuickBooks Online account to that particular invoice. And then from here, we can, of course, record and receive payments from our QuickBooks Online account. Maybe your QuickBooks Online is set up for online payments when you send these invoices out. So a lot of wonderful things that you can do here. And then just like with importing the other information, we can import those invoiced amounts over as well. And we can choose to do this at the same time. We can import all of this together, or we could just do one at a time. So maybe I want to include all of my invoicing since I haven't recorded a payment here. Pull that over, and it'll just drop that right into the QuickBooks invoiced amount column in your estimate, which by default is displayed in your invoicing view.
That's right. It's also displayed at the top in a very similar sense, or in a very similar way to the remaining balance, or your company's remaining balance, your budget for the project. In the same way, you can view your project's balance to finish from a billing perspective by changing to the remaining invoice tab, where we can see that the 20% amount that we imported is broken down across all of the different categories that are available for invoicing at this point. And of course, this step is also going to take into account not just the cost, but if you were using line item markups, the price. We already saw the option to check for the company overhead and margin calculations, which is probably going to be a little more typical for this type of project that we're looking at today, but there's a number of different ways to make sure that the profit is built in without you needing to do any type of manual calculations while, at the time of billing.
Now, the other thing that you can send over, and definitely will want to make sure, of course, that you're getting paid for, would be change orders. So on this project, I do have a few change orders already. And with these, you can, it looks like I already have, of course, some change orders. So you'll notice that I've got the option to send the change order to QuickBooks. So I can go ahead and create a quick invoice or send the change order to QuickBooks, even for ones that are already existing. But I do want to show you guys, how this is going to look for maybe a brand new approval that we get. So maybe we're going to create a change order here and just say,
everyone's favorite challenge, we need to move a door 2 feet to the left.
So we'll do a door relocation, north side of the building here. Now, of course, when you're creating your change order, you can fill out all sorts of wonderful information for tracking what type of change order this is, what reason, due dates, things like that. So we'll go ahead and give it a couple of those items, and then we'll, of course, begin to put together a price. Now, you can do that detailed or lump sum change order. We'll go ahead and do detail here.
Oh, who does this not affect, right?
Well, the great thing, Jordan, is that whatever sections I might want to account for here, I can go ahead and create as many line items as I need. So maybe we're just going to keep this simple, and we're going to call this additional material, and then we're going to call this additional labor. Now I can go ahead and mark this as material and labor within the change order here. If you accidentally add too many items like I did, you can get rid of some of those. So a lot of flexibility when you're building this out. We can go ahead and give this some costing information. So we're just going to say we've got about 2,500 here, and we're going to have about 3,500 here. And then just like within the estimate, we could apply things like markups and taxes, and we can link this to the estimate. So if I need to come in and maybe link to doors and windows down here, I can go ahead and do just like that. And I could link this line to a separate place on the estimate or the same. So it doesn't matter. You can do this, whatever way you'd like. We'll just link both of these to exterior doors here and move on to our next step. Now, one thing it's letting me know here is that I actually have forgotten to apply a markup to the change order. So ConstructionOnline is always looking out for your profitability. So this message is just asking, really, do I want to continue without adding a markup, or should we go ahead and add that in? So glad we caught that. I'm going to go ahead and add in a percentage markup to this change order. So we'll go ahead and set this at 25%.
Now, talk about time savings. I don't know if the time savings would be just time saved, not, screaming and throwing things in your office because you're doing, eating the cost for a change order. Or if you're saving people's time trying to find a new job because you didn't actually make profit on the project, or, where you might stand. But there's a lot of time savings in that simple prompt to make sure that you're including markup on your change orders.
Of course, with ConstructionOnline, your clients can approve through their ClientLink portal or owner portal themselves, so they can go in and mark that as approved and sign for the change order right there within the portal. Or you can mark it as approved on your side, which is what I'm going to do here. Either way, based on my settings, this is going to go ahead and send over to QuickBooks for me automatically. So we'll just go ahead and mark this as approved. And you'll notice that immediately I get these messages that it's going ahead and creating my change order estimate as well as my change order invoice within my QuickBooks Online account, so that is not something I have to worry about. I know that that's done. My accounting team will see that new invoice appear. And you can see here that it is sent to QuickBooks, so that becomes part of the history or timeline for this change order. Just like with the others, when I click on that, it's going to bring me into that section here within QuickBooks. We've got an option to create invoice. I'm not going to do that because we already have an invoice for this. And just like with your estimate, change orders not only can be sent, but you can receive payments for those and import those paid amounts back into ConstructionOnline so that you can see information about whether or not you've been paid for the change order. That will show up within the change orders tab of your estimate sheet, as well as here where we can see what's been accepted. At this point, my client has paid $0 for the change order, so I know that I haven't been paid for this yet, and we'll be watching for that number to change as we're importing those amounts over and this project progresses.
Well, beyond simplifying the actual change order development and communication process, as projects grow in scope and scale and complexity, keeping up with the volume of changes, especially for projects where there's some type of overactive clients, or in the case of a project's life cycle, especially larger scale projects, there's just so many different changes that will come up on a project. Making sure that you're tracking each change order as its own separate transaction entity can really help, reduce the questions in reporting and trying to track down, well, are we actually getting paid for the project as a whole? And helps answer the question, well, are the change orders, which could make or break a project, actually being paid on time as well?
Mm-hmm. That's right. Now you can see on my change order dashboard the ability to see that information, and of course we'll take a quick look at our change order tab on the estimate. So every estimate within ConstructionOnline, if you're using the advanced estimating, is going to have this change order section. So if I want to see that at a glance while I'm working within my estimate, I can see that information here, and you'll notice that I can see those invoiced and paid amounts showing up right here in this column. Again, all zeros at this point, but I know that's not what I want to see, and I've got a place that I can really keep an eye on making sure that that's happening. The other thing that we often will want to keep better track of as a company is not just individual lines on the estimate. So we're making huge improvements here to our job costing process, but there's another angle or another way of looking at this, which is your vendors that you're working with. And so one of the dashboards that we built in is a place where you can see your vendor transactions. So this isn't specific to one line on the estimate or one section on the estimate, but rather, and we'll go ahead and just look at a different time frame here, the last 30 days. This is going to allow me to see all of the vendors I'm working with on this project. It's going to allow me to see what we've committed to pay them so far, what they billed us, and what we've paid them, and what their balance is. So you're able to see all of that information within one dashboard area for the project. You can also see that on a higher level if we want to go out of a project and into more of a company look. which is especially nice if you are maybe working with different, the same set of vendors or subs on multiple projects. I hear that a ton. You develop those relationships, you're working with them on different projects. You do have a vendor transaction dashboard within your company section, which will allow us to see what it looks like for those vendors across all jobs, not just one project. So we'll go ahead and do maybe like the last 90 days or so. You can really go back and see as much data as you want. So I can see I've got 2 vendors here that I'm working with, what I've committed, what's been billed, what's been paid, and then I can see, here for my Mr. N. Ponder, I don't have any sort of remaining balance. We don't owe him any money at this point. For Danny, it looks like we do have a remaining balance still owed. I know I'm going to have to pay that out. And you can always look at that on an individual project level, as well. And if you want to see some more details about what that is, you can actually come in and see each purchase order listed for that vendor, bills that they're associated with, and payments, that have been recorded. So, wealth of information here just regarding those vendor relationships and your payments out to them.
Before our product team actually built this function inside of ConstructionOnline, when I was working with clients, trying to track this information down inside of QuickBooks Online was an exercise in frustration. It's doable. There's a number of different report customizations that you can set, but it takes so long. You have to customize the report every single time to make sure that you're filtering by a customer and job pair. And then you have to make sure that you've grabbed the right date and time frame, and you can't really switch back and forth as quickly. And even if you could, in order to actually drill down and see the transaction details, you have to open each and every single transaction and then close it inside of QuickBooks Online. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that QuickBooks Online isn't a great tool, but what we found is that for certain information, especially when you're dealing with tracking down bills and payments for subcontractors and suppliers, especially if there's some type of dispute or dispute on payments, trying to find that information quickly is going to not only help your team pull the information, but it's also going to keep tensions reduced, and it's going to keep your team calm and in a place of control, because they're able to quickly find and see exactly how much money has been paid and owed across the board from both an aggregate level, when we're looking at the top level for vendors, and also from a project-to-project basis. This is a question that this function answers very well, and does it much more efficiently than any other approach we've found to date.
Yeah, and notice as we're looking at this that as I expand out the details, I can see even the individual details on each purchase order, which project it's associated with, the amount of each line. So there's so much great information here. And just like with other pieces of the integration or other tools that you can use, all of these do link out to your QuickBooks. So rather than going into QuickBooks and trying to find something, you can get that quick view here and be able to just click on that again, and will take you directly to that item. So it's a big time savings there as far as that goes. So I think that wraps up the bulk of what we wanted to cover today. We looked at this workshop as a way to show how you could save time with using the integration while still getting that accurate job costing that you want. But I think that for most jobs, you'll see a much greater time savings than 5 hours. When you think about trying to track some of this information manually, it just, it really is going to save a lot of time, but also increase your visibility into the project and how the job is going from a financial perspective. We have had a couple of great questions come in, so we're going to take a few minutes here at the end of the session to answer some of those before we wrap up. If you have any last questions for us, this would be a great time to go ahead and shoot those over. But we'll go ahead and get started. So one user asks, just to really confirm, does UDA ConstructionOnline integrate with QuickBooks Desktop or only QuickBooks Online?
Yes, we integrate with both QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop. A lot of the functions that we've looked at today actually overlap between the two. There are some differences, but the general concepts we covered: producing customers and jobs, producing estimates, producing purchase orders, importing information back and displaying it in a dashboard view for your team, streamlining reporting, all of those elements are shared between both the QuickBooks Desktop integration and the QuickBooks Online integration. So wherever you are in the world and whatever tool you're using on that front, you'll be able to see similar time savings and results across the board.
That's right. There's, like you said, there's just a couple of small differences, but the big things that we've talked about today and those big time savers are really going to be the same. So let's see.
To echo one more time, I think as a visual cue will help here. We do integrate both with QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop. And if you take a look inside of the QuickBooks integration menu, you'll see options to connect with either one or the other.
That's right. Now with QuickBooks Desktop integration, the biggest difference is that because QuickBooks Desktop lives, of course, on your desktop and ConstructionOnline is completely web-based, there is a little desktop app called Socket that you'll need to download to facilitate that communication between what's on the web and ConstructionOnline and what information you have stored on your QuickBooks Desktop. So it's just something that allows us to transfer the information back and forth. But now your workflow is really going to be the same, and your time savings will be the same steps. So we're still going to create the estimate in ConstructionOnline. You'll still be able to send that estimate in its entirety over to your QuickBooks Desktop account. Through Socket, you'll be able to create purchase orders and invoices just like you can with the QuickBooks Online integration. So a little bit of difference in like where you go to perform the integration, but really the functionality is going to be very much the same in terms of what you can do and the benefits that you'll see.
Yeah, and if you have questions about the specifics of how each could work for you, we would be more than happy to answer those questions and work with you one-on-one.
Absolutely. Let's see. One person did want to know if this workshop had been recorded, if that was something you could access later. So just like what we try to do for each of these workshops is go ahead and record them and post them on our events page for our customers to watch whenever they need to either review a session or maybe get some on-demand training. So we have recorded today's session, and we will make sure to go ahead and send that out to any of you who have asked that question. I'll make sure that you get it as soon as it's available, and we'll also go ahead and send it out to anyone who's registered. If you're curious, all of those recordings of previous sessions are posted on our events page here. So that's udatechnologies.com/events. And here what you'll see first is a schedule of all upcoming webinars and a place where you can register for those. And as you can see, we do have some really exciting workshops coming up soon on the plan room and selections and estimating and covering some other new features that we've added into ConstructionOnline lately. And then all of those recordings are just located right beneath. So the ones that we've done last week and the week before, any really that we've done over the last couple of years, you can actually come back and access those, so you can review those really at any time.
Okay, looking through the questions, it looks like, okay, we should probably answer that one specifically, one-on-one. Next. Oh, this is a good question. Someone asked, is there a way to connect to QuickBooks Online projects? And the answer is yes. There's some really interesting reports that you can generate now within the projects menu inside of QuickBooks Online that are a little different than the standard reports that they offer in the reporting tab. Very straightforward. All you'll need to do is set the project up in QuickBooks Online ahead of time and make sure that it's named the exact same as your ConstructionOnline project. And when we say exact, we mean exact, letter by letter. Since it's a newer feature on the QuickBooks Online side, we're kind of making sure that it's stabilized on their front first. But if you set the project up and then you assign it to your customer, the same customer that you set here, instead of it creating a new job for you or sub-customer in the customers list, ConstructionOnline will detect the match and connect and produce the estimate and other transactions for you for the project instead. So you don't really need to select anything, you just need to make sure that you've created the corresponding project in QuickBooks Online first, And make sure that that project has the exact same name here in ConstructionOnline, and you will be good to go on that front.
Yeah, so many excellent questions. I know we are, I think, just about out of time, so we won't be able to go through all of these, but we will review them after the webinar. And if we have not been able to answer a question that you're asking, please feel free to either give us a call or send Jordan or I an email directly. We'd be happy to have a conversation with you and review some of those questions, or take a look at anything else that would be helpful, kind of help you get set up with the QuickBooks Online integration or the QuickBooks Desktop integration, whichever one you're using. So I think with that we are out of time, but do want to just say thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon. We enjoyed showing you how to save some time with this integration. Hope that you'll go out and use that, and definitely reach out to us with any questions.
Yeah, some of these questions deserve a great conversation. I'm actually really excited to use some of my time for the rest of this week to see if we can get in touch. So if you've asked a question, expect some type of outreach. We'll be talking to you soon. But for everyone else, we hope that you learned something new today, and that you all take care and stay safe as we move forward. Have a great weekend, everyone.